Welcome to Midlife Women Entrepreneurs, where you'll find real stories, practical strategies, and the mindset shifts you need for entrepreneurship. If you've ever felt like midlife was too late to launch a business, write a book, or chase a dream, think again. I'm Lynette Turner, your host, and I'm bringing you inspiring conversations and practical tips to help nudge you forward and keep growing in midlife. So let's jump in. Well, I have Jenn Cohen with me today, and I'm going to tell you this is someone who recently gave me one of my most profound intuitive sessions I have ever had. She's an intuitive channeler, and in this episode, I'm going to share some of that session with you, but later. Before we get started, Jenn, I want to welcome you to the podcast. Give us a little bit of a background on who you are, and then we're going to get right into it.
Oh, that was a great tease, I have to say. Coming from the entertainment industry, that was a cliffhanger. That was good. Thank you for having me on. Oh, and such a pleasure to be on. And it was such a pleasure having our time together before this. So my name's Jenn, and I'm an intuitive consultant and channel. And basically, I spent 27 years in the entertainment industry before I kind of the natural path from a corporate job and entertainment to becoming an intuitive channel. Um, that's kind of the roadmap, right? But I discovered, that purpose, that road, and haven't looked back ever since. And basically, I like to tell the story of how I first found my intuition and how I really tapped into the power of intuition when I was 20 years old. My dad passed suddenly, and I was 2 days into my junior year of college. And it was the night of his funeral. I was lying on his side of my parents' bed, and it was in complete darkness. And all of a sudden I was crying out, and I was just in complete surrender mode and just kind of crying out what's next, what's happening. And the bedside light next to the bed flashed on and off and on and off. And I stopped crying and I looked over and I said, "Dad, is that you?" And it flashed on and off and on and off. And then it was in that moment that I knew without a shadow of doubt that there was just so much more than what we were physically attuning to on this earth. And I made a pact with my dad in my grief that I was going to hand over my profession to him, that he was always going to take care of that. And I trusted that, and it relieved a lot of worry in my life. It didn't mean that I wasn't going to hit hiccups along the way. But, part of tapping into our intuition is trust and surrender, and knowing that this sense of ours, as some call it the sixth sense, I like to call it the first sense, is here for greatness. It's not here for smallness. And so getting out of my own way, knowing that my dad was going to have my back and guide me and put signs in front of me that I needed to follow. At the young age of 20, I didn't really understand what I was doing, the powerful technique that I was doing. But as I grew and as I moved through life, I completely see that was really my first teaching and my first in my intuition, and it hasn't let me down. And so when I was ready to leave my career as I knew it in entertainment, I probably could have left about 2-3 years before I actually did. But in those 2-3 years, he very clearly was showing me signs to get out, and he led me to becoming an intuitive consultant and channel. And I mean, if that isn't kind of the nail on the head, it was there all along. It was just the journey of how I was getting there, and the communication style that he was showing me was actually my training for what I am today.
Honestly, I struggled when we first were on our pre-call, like, what is an intuitive channel? So let's go there. And then I want you to kind of back up, because you actually had a really, what most people would think is a great career with some really fabulous companies. Let's talk a little bit about that. And then we'll kind of get back into that intuitive journey.
Yeah. So an intuitive channel, intuition is based in the present moment. So anytime that you're not in the right hemisphere of your brain where your intuition lives, you're in the left hemisphere, which is the critical mind. And in that critical mind, that's where your linear space is. So your past and your future. And so when you're in that space of your head, you're either worrying about something, anxiety about something. Usually those are the dissonance that we feel. And so when I talk about being an intuitive channel, it means that I'm tuning into the energy at the present moment. Doesn't mean that I'm predicting what's going to happen to you. That's usually what we think of when we think of psychic, but I'm tuning into the energy because we all have free will. We're all able to decide where we want to put our attention and where we want to change and if we want to change. And it's not happening to us. It's literally happening for us. And so when I am channeling, I'm tapping into the energy that the client is talking about, the words that they're saying, the words that they're not saying, how they're saying. It's the energy all around that. And then I'm communicating with, it can be your higher self. It can be souls that have transitioned. It can be souls that are still on the earth, pets, animals, houses, trees, nature, guides. And so it's endless if it has a soul, and I'm tapping into the highest, most loving energy. And it's providing perspective and it's providing insight as to what might be some blockages that are happening in someone's life or what's ready to open up so that, they could step into the greatness that's awaiting them.
Yeah, and we'll get more into that, like with some of the examples, because we are going to pull from my session as well. Because like I said earlier, it was just absolutely amazing. And even the post of the session was amazing. So,
Yeah.
okay, so you said that you had this really strong intuition, maybe even before your father's passing, but it deepened after your father's passing. How did you know he was really influencing and guiding you? Like, what were sort of some of the things that were happening or showing up for you?
Sure. So, for with him specifically, so the light, the electricity was again a sign, a signal, and when that happens, you have no choice but to be in the present moment. So that's the intuition part. And so I went back up to school, and obviously in deep grief, and I just remember walking down a kind of streets in the neighborhood that I was living in, the college town I was living in. And I'd be with friends, and my mind would just start wandering about all the milestones that we were going to miss together. And in that moment, I might like walk under a street light, and the street light would flicker on and off. And then I'd walk 10 paces, and then another street light would flicker on and off. And no one else was really noticing, but it would catch my attention. It would bring me right back into that present moment. And I would feel his love. I would feel his guidance. I would feel his connection. And it was so soothing. And I can say I'm closer with my dad now than I ever could have been had he been on earth. And he continued with those signs. For me, ladybugs were a big one, where I would be worrying about, where, if I wanted to leave work, if I, leave a job, if I wanted to take a chance and put my resume in for something, or if I was going on a big interview, I'd look out the window and there would be a ladybug. When I was taking a big move, I lived in California and moved to Manhattan, New York for a job. I remember leaving my apartment and I was out back with my mom, and a ladybug crawled onto my hand, and we were sitting there and the movers were moving the last of the boxes. And three of us, my dad in ladybug form and my mom, just sat there and kind of said goodbye to the apartment that I had lived in for 17 years. And this ladybug stayed on my hand for, I'm going to say 25 minutes until I said goodbye. Okay, I'm ready to go. And we left that apartment. So again, those are just some of the ways that energy, comes in and grounds us and says, no, this is right. Your intuition is correct. It's not a fearful state. It's a very expansive state, and it's nonverbal.
Your corporate career was, like you said, in the entertainment business, but maybe expand a little bit on that.
Yeah.
And then when you were ready to leave, you just talked about fears. So what fears did you face really stepping away from, the security of that career, the creativity behind that career?
Yeah. Yeah. So I started my entertainment career in an amazing place, DreamWorks SKG. At the time, it was the first year that it was in existence, and I started in the publicity department in animation. And what a creative, amazing, imaginative place to begin. It was really surrounded by so much hope, so much possibility, so much imagination and storytelling and creatives. And what I found in that position and where I eventually grew throughout my career, I was able to be in this kind of middle space between the creatives of DreamWorks and that the artistry. And that again is where intuition lives. And then I would be the middle spot between them and the corporate world. So, and that was much more critical thinking. You know, you need both sides, but it's much more the organizational side and the business side of things, less intuitive side of the house. Doesn't mean that they don't utilize it, but just for this example. And what I would need to do was speak with and interact with the animators, with the creatives, and translate that into a way that it made sense for the corporate. And in that role, which I found myself in many different, titles throughout my years in entertainment, but always I found myself in this middle role that was straddling between the creative side and more of the critical thinking side. And it's very similar to what I do as a channel, where I'm speaking with energy and kind of fifth dimension soul correspondence, and then translating it down into the third dimension, into this physical realm. So as I moved through my career from DreamWorks, I did international marketing at IMAX theaters. And then I went over to NBC Universal and was in more of a consumer marketing space there. But what I found is that I would just kind of gravitate towards the creatives in each of these positions that I was in. And it wasn't necessarily in the job description, but it was just where my spirit was taking me. Eventually, I was in production, and then I went to Warner Media in New York, and that was where I really kind of climbed the ladder to a pretty high executive, and it was in that space in New York where I encountered a lot of different energy than I had in California. And anyone that's been to Manhattan knows that is an intense city to live in. And I'll tell you, I needed to experience that for the polarity of, oh, this isn't energy that's mine. This is energy I'm picking up. I needed to begin to understand how to put up a boundary around myself, not in a negative way, but just in a way where I wasn't absorbing so many people's energy and discerning what was my energy and what wasn't mine. Because for your intuition to find you, actually, your intuition is always here. It's just getting yourself in a space to hear it. But in order to get myself into a space to hear it, I needed to clear out the dust and, the stickiness from everyone else that I was picking up. So it was in that last 10 years, I would say, of my career that I was really faced with a lot of noise that I needed to understand in order to get clear. And about 2-3 years before I actually put my name in to be released from my contract, I was hearing many times, I was hearing like, bring crystals to this meeting, avoid this person. But, again, sometimes you just can't avoid your people. And in fact, it was my boss that I was trying to avoid. You can't really do that. But I kept telling people around me, it's like talking to a wall. Like talking to these people is like talking to a wall. And then one day in meditation, I was sitting in meditation, and all of a sudden I had this visual of myself, and she comes and she looks me straight in the eyes, and I'm looking at her straight in the eyes, and she says, it's like talking to a wall. And at that moment I understood, okay, it's this external is not going to change. It's my internal. This is pushing me towards something. And from then on, it really started opening up, and that awareness that, oh, okay, I need to start making steps, because this is going to continue on the way that it is. And unfortunately, the entertainment industry is changing rapidly and continues to change rapidly. And, it's in a state of transition.
When you were talking about absorbing other people's energy, do you pick up the energy of others when you're channeling with them?
Yeah, but I understand now that it's not, I'm picking up their energy, but it's in a container that I am controlling. And so being aware as an empath, that I'll just give an example. I've had friends that have been friends for 20 something years, and I didn't realize how much I was absorbing from them, because my story in my head was that in order to be a good friend, I need to be available to them at all times, listen to them talk for 2 to 3 hours on the phone, and, just take everything that they're dishing out. And then when we hang up the phone, I wonder why I'm exhausted. That's an old story. So when I became clear on how much I was absorbing and why I was absorbing that, okay, the old story in my head was, this is how a friendship is. This is how you show up for people. When I could look at that belief and really put it to the test of like, no, actually, that's not how this needs to be. I can be there for them, but it's going to be 10 minutes. And then when they start to repeat themselves, I'm going to excuse myself and I'm going to say, you know what, gotta go. Sorry, whatever. You don't have to apologize, but gotta go. I'll talk to you later. And then it's being very honest with whoever it is. I hear you, but, you've talked for an hour and 50 minutes of this conversation. The 10 minutes that I got was to answer a question that you asked about yourself. And I didn't even, I just thought it was just kind of how it was until, I heard somebody say something. I was talking with someone. I don't know how, but it started to seep in. I read something where it's like, oh, actually, no, that's actually not how relationships need to be. And I was calling that in because I was familiar with it. And so I needed to take responsibility of that, no matter how uncomfortable it got for me. When I finally voiced it to two friends, actually, when I voiced it to them, they both said, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry you feel like that." And it was a fantastic reaction. Where work came on my side is they didn't change their behavior because that's their work to do. But my work came as the next time that they did it, I was like, oh, I gotta go, or I'll talk to you later. And what slowly started to happen, and it's scary for some people. For me, it felt okay because I was gaining so much of my life back. But these friends of 20 something years started to fall away, and I could allow myself to stay in that vampire kind of energy vampire relationship. And I could ignore my intuition and I could ignore what my higher self was telling me for the sake of an old story of like, oh, it's better to have old friends and old friends are the best. They know you through blah, blah. But if you're not changing and you're not, moving together, it's okay to take a pause. And however long that pause occurs is however long it is. And, I would say to myself, this is for right now. That's all I know is this present moment. I don't know, if we're going to, have rekindle some kind of relationship in the future, but that's not what I need. Right now is what I'm focused on and accessing.
That's really good. You were getting messages from a very young age, little whispers maybe in your ear. But how does somebody recognize intuition in themselves? And then when they recognize that, is it the first thought is the intuition and they should act on that intuition? Because I think sometimes we can get to a place where now we overthink that intuition and we don't act in that certain way that our body is telling us to act.
Yeah, it's such a good question. And the discernment is real. So intuition, when you're in knowing, and we can all think about like, I'm just going to take intuitive eating just as an example. I wake up in the morning. If someone says to me, here's some meatloaf at 8 a.m., I mean, I can almost throw up, like that sounds terrible, but that is my body. I can feel it in my stomach, like that's just, I know I don't want meatloaf at 8 a.m. Knowledge doesn't operate in language. We put language to it. So that knowing that you have is just, no, I don't want that. But if I tune into my body and I say, what do you want to nourish yourself with? It's probably going to give you some answers. It might be eggs. It might be toast. It might be a banana. It might be, fruit, whatever. But just, those are just little tiny things of like every single day. It's like that intuitive knowing. We've also, we've had hits, all of us. Some people get goosebumps on their arms or, a chill up their spine. People say like, oh, I just had a gut feeling. A lot of times, let's say that you're in a relationship that is probably not right for you, but it might take some steps, and intuition doesn't often get loud, or it's not really urgent, but it is consistent. So it will repeat itself. So, it'll come through. And then when it's time to jump, you're just like, okay, I've done all the worrying through these, steps. And now there's not a doubt in my mind that this is the decision I need to make.
That's so true, right? That's good clarity.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. You clearly have transitioned successfully from your corporate world to your intuitive entrepreneurship. I'm going to call it that.
Yeah.
What practical advice would you give to someone who might be sort of thinking the same thing? Like, I mean, maybe not into a intuitive entrepreneur,
Yeah.
something else, something that's a little more, they want to take a similar leap into something that's more meaningful, but they're a little bit uncertain. What kind of steps would you suggest for them?
Sure. So for me, what kept me in the space that I was for a while were, people call them the golden handcuffs, all of the perks, obviously a steady paycheck, travel was part of that for me. And there's a lot of control through fear. And I started to see that. I started to see, okay, well, I get to travel to these really great places, but when I get there, I'm surrounded by people that I don't want to be with. So I'm able to travel, but it's not fulfilling. I've always wanted to go to this place, but oh my God, I cannot stand who I have to share, travel with. And so it started to become like, again, the old stories of, but you're so successful. And then what happens is that once we start to lean in more to our integrity, into more of what really drives us, what really pushes us forward, our purpose driven life. When we start to do that, it starts to open up this entire field of people that are vibrating in that same vibration, that are vibrating in that same frequency. And then these synchronicities begin to happen. And so what I would say to somebody that's thinking about it is really trusting, and it doesn't mean leap right away, but let's say that, you want to maybe write a book or something like that, and you need more free time, and your job just doesn't allow you, you're exhausted because you're depleted from a full day's of work. I would start putting it out there of I'm writing a book. I'm writing a book. I'm going to find time, whether it be early in the morning on my lunch break or whatever, and I'm just going to start to write. And I'm trusting that the message in that I'm writing this book is for a greater good. It's not just for my ego. It's just not for me. It's going to help me. And then I would start to talk about it. And you'd be amazing what your intuitive self starts to open up. It's not coincidences, it's synchronicities. You'll find somebody that has written a book that can introduce you to a coach. You'll find somebody that's an illustrator, if it's a children's book, that's going to help you with that story. But it's basically being aware of where you want to go, and then opening up to this sense and saying, guide me, show me the way, show me these breadcrumbs. And it is in those small first steps that you kind of say to the critical mind, to the mind that's really trying to keep you static, that's trying to keep you in fearful mode, we're going to start to balance our brain here a little bit. I've been living in fear far too long. I'm going to remember what it was like to be joyous and to be free and to, be imaginative and expansive, and bring that online and really balance out my brain a little bit more here.
Yeah, I know. I love it. It's that whole quantum timeline, which I just introduced myself to in the beginning of the new year. But that frequency and putting back on that frequency and thinking and believing that you've already are there is such a hard thing to do, but it is powerful. And if you can keep your mindset there, it's amazing. And there's this whole thing about like sometimes you'll get drawn back into your old self if you're continually in that frequency of having and feeling all of that. but I don't know, like, I don't even know what to say to that. Like, cause I feel like sometimes that's where I am, where I'm like, okay, I feel like I'm on this really great path. And then all of a sudden, whoop, I'm getting pulled back.
Oh, it's part of it. It's part of it. It happens to me all the time. It just happened to me with a project that I was working on, where it's old patterns, and it's first of all, I think it's harder to stay in place than to move, because when when you're in that anchor that's kind of, just like pulling you, you're unsatisfied. It's like you can continue to churn and churn and churn and get nowhere. It's like kind of, running in place, treading water. But this is an example of something just happened to me. There was a great project that is going to help with my intention of where I want my business to be and what I want to do in life. And it was hanging over my head, and I was procrastinating, and I was finding every single way in order to not get my butt in the chair. And through exercise, I was finding a way to really procrastinate. And that's a very healthy habit that my mind was kind of tricking me into. And so I would, take hours long hikes, and then I would come back and I was physically exhausted at that point. I'm like, oh, I'll get to the presentation, the project tomorrow. And that just kept happening until one morning I woke up, and it was like I aged 10 years overnight on just like the right side of my body. It was kind of seizing up, and exercises that I could do, I really couldn't do anymore. And I was just kind of like ping ponging in my head. This is the part that drags you back. It's like, oh, did I hurt myself doing an exercise? Did I hurt myself when I was sleeping? Did I slip somewhere? Like, this is where the critical mind's like searching, trying to find. And it was taking me away from what my intuition was trying to tell me, which was, no, in order to expand, in order to grow, in order to call in what you have put into your GPS of where you want to go, you need to do this. And so finally I was talking with a friend, and I mentioned this about my body, and they said, well, have you asked? And I'm like, oh my God, I do this. I do this. I can't believe I didn't ask. And I did. I took a pause, and I asked, and I asked my intuition. I said, what's going on here? And I heard so clearly, get your ass in the chair. And when I did, it flowed through, and my walks and exercise, my body started to relax. I could still do my exercise. It wasn't a crutch anymore though. And I was rewarded very, very clearly. But that's part of it. It's when we get dragged back to that place, that we've lived in all of our lives. It's a great gift that we can then call in our intuition, saying, okay, what are you trying to tell me here? What are you trying to tell me? Oh, I ran into this person and they made me feel like this. Oh, okay. My intuition's trying to tell me they're monopolizing my time again, and I'm allowing it. Okay. I've got to set this boundary. I've got to do this work. I'm going to go into meditation. I've got to get out in nature. But it's really this beautiful game of life that we've all signed up for, that constantly is showing us the balance. And so I wouldn't look at those times that were pulled back as necessarily negative. It's this light that's shining on the shadow of like, oh, okay, I've got some work to do there.
Okay, so let's move over to the channeling session that you did for me.
Yeah.
I'm going to just kind of say some things, and then there'll be a question. And if you can answer it, great. If not, then we can move on to something else.
Yeah.
So this is your time. Anything that's in your heart, ask it, and I'll channel whoever comes forward. So that's how you opened our session. And to be completely honest, I wasn't really sure what to expect, but you created this safe environment and grounded and deeply validating. So you already talked about what an intuitive channeling is. Maybe you could help by expanding on how to prepare for a session with you.
Sure. The most important thing is an open heart. So if you're going to come in with a skeptical mind of, I've got something in my pocket and we'll see if she can guess it, I'm not the person. That's not what we're doing. So it's really open to the messaging that's coming. And if something doesn't resonate right away, that's totally fine. These messages are really layered. That's why I record and send a recording to everyone that I channel for and everyone that I work with, because when you can go back, it's present moment. So in that present moment that you're listening to it, it might unlock a different layer. And that's how the guidance of the messages are coming through. So I would just say in very open heart, knowing that what resonates, I'll take, what doesn't, I don't need to, and that it's an embodied practice. It's not something where you need to be taking studious notes. That's what the recording's for as well. Again, you can jot down a few notes, but that's using a different part of our brain. And we're opening up the more expansive nonverbal side of our brain so that when you hear something, it resonates throughout your body. And so it's really going against probably what most of us learned in school and how we learn. It's really taking it from an absorbing embodiment practice.
Yeah. Yeah. And I quickly realized the more I spoke to you from my heart center, that you were tapping into something spectacular, I guess.
That's a great point too, that I want to say is specificity. The more specific you are in our sessions, thank you for bringing that up. That's so huge. The more specific message you're going to get. So the more general you're going to get. So again, tuning into your heart, like you just said, and being specific and being vulnerable in what you share. That is what's going to really bring you clarity around the answers that you're looking for.
Exactly. And that's a perfect cue clip for the next one because I shared with you there was some stuff going on with my children. Oh, now it's going to get emotional. But so the cue was, when you're kinder to yourself, it's amazing how much kinder I'm going to be to you. So that message came through from the higher self of my daughter, Haley, and it really kind of hit me hard. And I just wonder, like, there are many midlife mothers and fathers who could possibly relate to that push-pull dynamic. Why do you think that we experience some distance with our adult children? Like, what's really going on beneath the surface?
Yeah. So everyone's different, but in general, what I see is there's so much passed down generation to generation in our ancestry. And we're in a time and place right now that change is incredibly quick. How our mothers had to live versus how we live versus how our kids live. I mean, it's almost like a different planet. And those patterns of how we have been raised and how we interact are being tested. And in order for certain generations to survive, they needed to really discard the feminine versions of ourselves and pick up a lot of the masculine traits. And it was out of balance quite a bit. And what we're seeing with new generations and later generations is that they're much more in tune with the feminine side. We're in a divine feminine era. The patriarchy and the masculine is again, it's on its last leg here, and we can see the push that they're having all around to try and stand their ground. But we're seeing a lot of resistance against that. And so what I see with my clients that are struggling with this is that there's a dissonance between how they were raised, what they truly believe, and how they raised their children in the earlier years of their lives. And I'll say the word again because it's just coming through so clearly, there's a dissonance, there's a fracture in that. And mothers have sacrificed a lot of themselves for their children many, many times. And children do not want their mothers to sacrifice themselves for their children. It puts a lot of guilt on their children, which can change to anger, which can change to blame. And it's a very uncomfortable feeling there in terms of energy. And so as the mother, and I'll say the midlife sector, once we can come back to our own energy and with love and with boundaries and with a new form of living our lives to our potential and not looking for any validation from our children and not looking for any kind of control over what our children do, it's going to have an effect on the relationship that frees both sides. It's this energetic tie from past generations that is fear-based, and it's trying to keep everybody protected, but it's outdated.
The next clip. If we turned the faucet on too quickly, it would scald you. This steady stream is divine timing. That was channeling my higher self. And so when that came through, that was about my business growth and the podcast and what I was feeling about where I wanted to take my business, my podcast, all the stuff that I do right now. And I felt just a sense of relief because I know that I push with masculine, okay, I got to get this done. I got to do. And so what was channeled was this slow growth as sacred, not shameful. And so it's slow, consistent growth. And I never really realized that before. So for me, you also said that we've got to come up with a different word than hustle. And so the question is, how can we shift from hustle to more of intuitive creation? Because I feel like then that's more the slowing down.
Mm-hmm.
And why is it so hard for ambitious women to really turn off that hustle?
Culturally, that's what we've been, told is successful. Work, grind, work your fingers to the bone. The harder you work, the more you're going to get paid off, like that. And that has worked for a lot of people. And those are the people that in this masculine society with that masculine tone, in the masculine media, in the masculine news is what's being fed to us. And that means join the corporation, be part of the system. We'll take care of you, but you're feeding a bigger machine than yourself. What we're seeing now is an influx of entrepreneurs, especially after the pandemic. People are saying, you know what, that's for the birds. I'm going to live a much more fulfilling life and I'm going to do something that I really want to do. But what we take with that is how we become successful. And it's that old story of work. Have 15 meetings in a day where you get nothing done, but on your schedule, it looks like you just, you killed it that day. You had 15 meetings, but oh my God, I really didn't get anything done. How many of us have thought that in a corporate job? And so it's this busy. And what that does is, again, it takes us out of the present moment where intuition lives. And that is the masculine part of the brain. It's the critical thinking. It's the doing. So as we're trying to rebalance that brain into the feminine side, we have to catch ourselves and say, okay, I've got on, and here's just a really practical thing. Some people really love to make lists. On my list, I've got 10 things to do today. I would challenge you to do 2 or 3 of those and not beat yourself up over not doing the other 7. And it is, and you'll know, you can use your intuition. You can say intuitive, higher self, guide my eyes to which 3 things I should be doing today. And it'll just pop. They'll be like, ding, 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 ding. Don't second guess. Because again, that's the fear coming in saying, if you don't get those 10 things done, you're a failure. Your business is going down the drain. That's it. But when we do those 10 things, we don't leave the space for the universe, for our intuition to come in and surprise and delight us. We don't give it the space for those synchronicities to come in because we're head down. We're not looking, we're not paying attention. We're not in the present moment. We're not unable to, really get to our imagination. We're unable to be with nature, be outside. We're unable to have, talks or conversations with people that really light us up. So it's noticing. It's that awareness is the first thing. Okay, I'm noticing that I am pushing myself to the limit every single day to fall exhausted into bed to say that I did something today. When some of the most powerful work, if you're exhausted and your body is telling you, I need a nap today, that is the most powerful thing that you can do in that day. Right. And it's listening and it's being able to be objective in the way that you see success now and resting your body so that you're feeling inspired and that you're feeling energized the next day or that day, oh my God, that's the most powerful thing that you could be doing.
After our session, I took, I actually blocked off the rest of the day. And so that night, I went to bed a little bit earlier with the full intention of doing a meditation, because throughout that conversation we had, there was a lot of ask to receive. And so I did that. I did a deep meditation, and I just felt so excited that after that, and just how much clarity I think I had speaking to you, bringing it in my higher self. You brought in my mother, you brought in my kids, both my kids. I think we forget to tap into our higher self. It's that asking to receive, and what you said it earlier in the podcast, and now I'm going to just paraphrase it, let it come to you. And I really think that that is your higher self that is giving you those answers. My question for you is, what does it really, truly feel like or mean to live in alignment with your higher self, to always be able to tap into that receiving state?
To me, it means freedom. It means that I have support no matter what. Even in some of the darkest days, I know who to call immediately. And that is my higher self. That is my best friend. That is the person that has known me the longest. That is tried and true. That is trust. And when I turn my attention to that, when I am down low, exhausted, tired, don't know the answer, when I can say, I'm here with you, give me some strength, they will immediately fill my body with love. And it's not necessarily words, but it is that feeling that I'm held, that I'm loved, that I'm taken care of, and that in that moment, yes, things might seem really difficult, but they have a bird's eye view that tells me it is all working out, and you are going to be amazed by what is in store.
Exactly. And I guess you've got to just figure out how to call that in, like what works best for you to call that higher self in.
Yeah. And the more that you can get yourself into that vibration, it's like a code. So it's finding your energetic code. Is it is it doing things that you love, like dancing or playing music or driving with the windows down and the radio on, like finding where that joy is for you. And that's how you begin to find out how you connect with your higher self. So that then at any time it's available, because you know now, oh, they're always there. They're always there. And with those higher frequencies, it's just easier to hear them. And then it gets to the point where when you are down, it's so uncomfortable to be uncomfortable and to be down that you have to, you basically are like, oh, wait, now I remember my practice. Let me go back and ask.
That's good. So one last question, and then I want you to share how people can find you to book their own intuitive channeling session. What would you say to somebody who's a little bit skeptical of all of it?
Mhm.
The frequency of the channeling, of intuition, and what would you encourage them to think about?
I would, first of all, that's okay. And then I would ask them what stories have led to that. So, was it that you saw a bunch of movies, that scared you about it? It might be religion. It might be relatives. It might be, I don't know, someone played with a Ouija board when you were in elementary school and it freaked you out. That's not what this is. But I would just kind of question. And if there is some curiosity around that, okay, that's great. If not, it just might not be the time. And that's totally fine. But if this conversation spoke to you, that's your intuitive self saying, hey, this is a good little ping here. Yeah. And follow that.
All right, Jen. Well, they're going to follow it. So where can they find you?
I love that. So website's probably easiest. It's Jenn with two N's, Cohen, Cohen, intuitive.com. And on there, you can contact me via email. You can book a session directly. I've got packages and mentorships that are available. But again, if you have any questions, I'm always available and could talk about this for hours. Yeah, no, and I could talk to you for hours too.
I know I'll be going back to my recording quite a bit. I've already transcribed it and I have little pieces of it kind of in little spots where doing some of my own analysis on it. So I love that. Thank you, Jenn. You are amazing. It was such a nice, calm, beautiful conversation, and I hope to chat with you soon.
Thank you for having me.
Hey, it's Lynette. Thanks for listening today. Please like and subscribe. And if there's somebody out there that you think could benefit from the episode, give it a share. Midlife is your time, so go get it.